Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I have to tell you, Chen's actually an old boss. He is like the master of team building. He fired me for good reason. I just want to start with that. But before we actually get there, that this is true, right? Maybe he let me go is a better term. But anyway, let's start with this.
Hey guys,
So, John, welcome. It has been like forever. I've been watching you do karaoke and other kinds of things on social media, both LinkedIn and Facebook. And I ran into somebody who was a mutual, at least Facebook acquaintance, and it was like, man, I got to talk to this guy about what he is doing. You are the master of virtual events. So I want to just sort of start by having you talk a little bit about what you have been doing. So we're going to change the view here a little bit, and you're on.
So the best part here too, for those who know Steve Moran, right? For those who don't know him in his previous lifetime, he had one of the best job titles, which is the world's worst geocacher, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. I'm the world's worst geocacher.
So he still has that. But Steve, let me just share a little bit about so that's how Steve and I met. I actually had a team building business that did that. So let me share a little bit, Steve, what I've been doing in the last 2 years in 3 minutes. All right. So I'm the author of a book now called Engaging Virtual Meetings. But what did I do before this? Well, I did this. I used to do team building based on geocaching. That's how Steve and I met. So I used to do about 100, 140 events a year using geocaching for team and leadership training. And then this little thing happened. And I mean little, Steve, this little big thing happened. And for me, what happened is I had 15 canceled events in March of 2020. And so, you got to be resourceful. And so you had to decide, what am I going to do? Is everyone go back for a moment and think about March of 2020 and all the uncertainty? And so one of the things I had to go back and lean on was, what experience did I have? And I said, oh, I was on this, right? Steve, do you remember this thing?
I remember that. Yes.
So this is Prodigy. This was actually pre-AOL. It was famous because it was a first graphical based interface. And so I've calculated I've been meeting online for 35 years. And what I love to tell some of the other people is that this is when modems used to make noise, right? So anyways, I was on Prodigy. And so I also wrote this book, 50 Digital Team Building Games, in 2011. And for decades, I've been trying to tell people we could meet online, we could do meaningful work, you could save the travel and expenses, you could have dinner with your kids. And everyone goes, John, that's a great idea, but here's a bunch of money. And you need to fly to Orlando. And I'm like, oh, geez, right? So, but until this thing happens. So again, I'm sitting in my office. I have no idea what to do. I don't make vaccines, but I do know how to make your virtual meeting better. So I put this little class called Virtual Team Building on Eventbrite, and over 5,000 people took this class in 2020, Steve. Yeah, that's a wow. And so my publisher came back and said, hey, John, would you like to write your second book? And I'm like, sure, let's do that. So I wrote my second book, and I wrote it in 1/3 of the time as my first book. I finished the manuscript in 8 weeks. And we got it out in October 2020 because Steve, at the time, we didn't know how long this pandemic was going to last. Like, people were saying it's going to be over September, October. Well, we know that's not true. Anyways, it came out and released in the #1 hot new release in Amazon's business communications piece here. And so now I spend most of my time, Steve, designing and producing, as well as speaking at and emceeing at virtual meetings. Here's some fun people I've got to work with. This is Jay Bottasinga, author of Walking Dead. This is Patrick Lencioni, author of 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. This is Elizabeth Gilbert, right? The author of Eat, Love, Pray, that sold 16 million copies, had Julia Roberts play her in a movie. And of course, this guy, right? Damon John, who's from FUBU, and I'm famous for being on Shark Tank. So I got to be their producers, and I really got a chance to, where my job is to make them look good. And speaking of which, Steve, right? I think you have spoken at least once or twice at a virtual meeting, right?
Once or twice.
Okay, so I'm going to give you my #1 tip for virtual speakers. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. The tip is stand up. And it sounds simple, but I got to tell you, those 4 really famous people on that last screen, they forgot this tip that you should stand up, right? That when you stand up, you physiology will feel different. And then the people, even if they can only see this much of you, will receive you different. So again, we can all sit down while we're attending, but if you are to speak, I can give you this #1 tip, which is stand up. Oh, look, come on, Steve is getting up here.
I've got my stand-up desk, man, so I'm going up.
There you go. And so let me just show you while he's standing up. Here's how I'm doing it. Over the last 24 months, Steve, I built this gigantic green screen. So like this is what I see, but up here is what you see. And last but not least is what did I do over the last 24 months is I built this thing, right? And so this is one of the ways that I'm able to produce, conferences as large as 1,200 and do a lot of things that other people are unable to do. So basically that's what I've been up to the past couple of months.
So, man, I've got so many questions for you. Let me actually just move us back. Wait, we're gonna do that.
There we go.
I love, and I got to get. The thing I love about StreamYard for this is that it fills full screen as opposed to Zoom, right? But it also means that you've got to be a little more careful. And of course, since I'm now standing up, my background isn't quite as terrific as it was. So I got to figure that out. But there's no doubt about it that when you're standing up, it's better, right?
Right.
No question. So are you standing up now?
No. So in this case, yeah. So if I wanted to stand up, let's see if I could actually, let's try this one. Watch this. If I really was to stand up, I have these 2 options. So I sit down because if I have to operate a bunch of stuff, but now I can do this, right? And I can do, hey, it's 72 and sunny here in Switzerland, right?
Yes. I love it. So what is it? Let's actually start and talk about. I think I've got 2 agendas, and you may have other things you want us to talk about. I think I'm going to actually sit back down to. So
okay, we'll both sit down for this part. But again, it's a great piece if you are keynoting, right? And what I would do for you, Steve, is like extend your bookshelves up. And I actually test both views, the high view and the low view. In my programs now, I just leave my camera in the same place and I choose to walk back and forward sometimes is the way that I go through from stand up to sit down.
Yeah, here we go. So I got, let me see. I got my camera adjusted a little bit. So here we are. We're sort of back where I'm supposed to be, right? So if I decide, so I've got 3 agendas that I think I want to talk about. So I want to talk about, I decide to do a virtual event. What do I do to make it better? And of course, I'm sure we have to start by buying your book. And so we'll talk to people about how they can do that before we're done. The second thing is I'd like to actually get some tips for you about how to do better events when you're doing it in person, because that is back, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe some very specific tips that we're talking about. So what else anything else we should be talking about?
Yeah, let's go through a couple of these. And I think you actually in that mix, Steve, you might want to add a hybrid. You're probably starting to see more hybrid now too, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have some great experience with that. So
I know what the other one I wanted to talk about is equipment.
Oh yeah. Is what? Sorry, say again?
Equipment and platforms.
Oh yeah, equipment and platforms. Okay,
we use StreamYard for this because it's what makes LinkedIn happy. We use Zoom every day. So I don't know what else.
Yeah, every tool is good for a purpose. Okay, so let's start with the first one. If you have a virtual meeting, right, or a virtual conference, I think there's a couple tips that I can give you. So we have a 6-step engage method. I'll give you maybe like 1 or 2, right? And the first one, so we use the word engage as that turns into an acronym that you can remember. So the first 2 is the E stands for engage, engage with every person before the end of the meeting, right? And so that's one of the keys is have a plan. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 people or if it's 500, right? You can actually have a plan to engage with every single person before the end of the meeting, because you can use this verbal, right? So Steve and I are now talking with each other. He's the host of this meeting. He's got to be slightly engaged. But once you get to 500, then you can use other avenues such as chat. So chat to me is the second most powerful or second most engaging tool on virtual, because it's the one place everybody can talk at the same time. Right. And so if you've been at a great conference at that where the chat is starting to really flow almost so fast that you can't read it, that means everybody who's chatting, though, is somewhat engaged in that because they're interacting, right, with each other and with the speaker in that way. So that's one of them. Have a plan, right, to engage everyone before the end of the meeting. And the second one, the N, stands for never lead a virtual meeting alone. Right? You can have one-on-one meetings like this alone, but when you have a high-value meeting, like a sales meeting, or a high-value meeting like a presentation, I highly suggest that you work with somebody else. So even myself, Steve, after being online for 35 years, I can still get caught on. I'm just messing with you, but I can get caught on.
I knew that. I had this moment of panic, and I said, "Oh no, John's doing that." So,
that's right.
Yeah.
And so the point about that is it's like number one, too. If you've ever been caught on mute, which should be all of you, it's not your fault. The technology is designed in such a way that it still messes with us as humans that we don't get it, right? And so that's number one. So number two is work as a team, right? So quite often, if I'm working, even when I'm presenting, if I want to be the most engaged presenter, I use a producer. And the producer is admitting people, muting people who are loud, right? They're chatting things I want chatted at certain times. They're running the polls. They're setting up breakout rooms, because they can do all of that while I don't break a stride for you. I can stay focused on you, the attendee, the audience, and people will get that, because there's nothing worse, Steve, than the dreaded words. And now I'm going to share my screen. Right, which is, it adds no value to the attendee. I don't need to know that.
Yeah. Well, and so two things that just make me laugh. So the first is I had an agreement to, and they likely will be watching this at some point in time, but I was asked to come down and talk to senior living leaders in New Zealand, and the event was going to take place in Fiji. And needless to say, I was very excited about that. And then, of course, I had airline tickets bought, and the pandemic hit, and you couldn't travel. And so ultimately, I did it virtually. And I frankly was not very happy with the result. And they have never complained to me, but they probably weren't very happy. And I'm thinking, if there would have been two of us on, that's right. If there'd been two of us on, it would have been crazy good. And I just wish we'd had this conversation back then, so yeah. I'd know that. But I have gotten smarter about it. So we just did a virtual event for life enrichment directors. And one of the things that we did is we offered $100 each day to the person who initiated the most chats. And over a 4-hour period, we'd get like 1,000 chats. And there was worry that it would be just terrible, but it was honestly, it's good stuff.
It's fun.
So yeah. It is. And you're right. I mean, it was going so fast, you could hardly read it half the time. So
I actually teach a whole class on in creating chat psychological safety, which we could chat a little bit about later. But there are multiple techniques in chat so that you're adding to the conversation. So I'll give you one simple one. You were asking for tips. One of them is like quote the speaker, right? So if we said a great quote like build relationships long before you need them, right? And if a speaker says that and that resonates with you, then help amplify that by quoting the speaker. Right. I'm actually one of the fastest chatters. Like if we chatted a book like Lead Don't Manage, if I was your producer at that point, I would actually be using another screen, going to Amazon, getting that link and putting it in the chat before anybody else does. And people will thank you. They're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for that. And sometimes, and again, it's not coming from you, the speaker. It's a great way to, I think, do some marketing as well as be helpful for the audience. And so there's all these different ways. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Like that, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So no, that's really good. So what else can I be doing?
Okay. Now let's kind of move to this in-person hybrid piece.
Yeah.
Right? So the in-person, I mean, it's still the same, right? When you're a speaker in-person, there were multiple ways that people were looking at engagement pre-pandemic, such as like poll everywhere, right? It's like you get your cell phone out and text a certain number and the poll starts, happening on stage. So I think those are things that are really important. But now that I'm doing a hybrid, I think there's a couple things that are really important. And the basis of it comes from what I call hybrid level 1, 2, and 3. So number one, right, as we start to see more hybrid, by the way, I'm standing on the shoulders of like lots of people who I know who've been doing this for over 20 years. They've been live streaming for over 20 years. So this is not new, people. There's some great experts out there. Go find them. One of them is level 1 is you just set up a camera and an audio, and then you let it run. So now a virtual person can attend, right? But right now they're like in the early stages, there was no interaction. And in the early stages, that was a lot. But the second one now is where at least one person in virtual can talk to the in-person audience, and or the one person in the in-person audience can talk to the virtual. So you've seen this where either in person, right, there are people speaking with a live audience, and now the virtual can also interact, right, as the second part. We've also seen where there's an in-person audience and the speaker actually has come on virtual and they're on a big screen, and so they can all interact. So the ways that are super important for this, Steve, is to make sure that that you have a rehearsal. You got to test all this stuff. It's so easy to get wrong or to get echo or to like not understand each other. And obviously you don't want to do that in front of 500 or 600 people, right? And so one is test all the equipment out. And the second one is then test the two scenarios. So like in the in-person audience, make sure you have extra mics. Because if you do not have a mic and an in-person person asks the question, the person in virtual land is like, huh? And they have no idea what's going on. Yeah. Right. And the secondary part is that if you can't afford that, is then the speaker has to repeat the question. But I got to tell you, the number of speakers who forget to do that right now is still very high. You really have to train yourself to do that because you have to think about the virtual audience. So for instance, things that I do if I'm an in-person, but I know that there's a virtual audience, I will take the extra energy and effort to log in an extra laptop, right? And ask them to maybe chat some things and then go back and read them back to the audience so that the virtual audience understands that I'm paying attention to them or that somebody is. So I think
and the other part of that, the other part of that seems to me, not only is it taking better care of the virtual audience, but in reality, the in-person audience is likely missing some really rich stuff in the chat. As we've done these, I do a team meeting every Friday morning, and one of the things we talked about was going back and pulling all those chat transcripts, because I'll write some articles. I mean, there's some rich stuff in there that bright people who are participating, who are saying things, and in some sense, it's better than in person, as you said, right? Because there's this rich interaction that you could never get in person.
So I got to get you to this part, Steve. Steve, have you ever heard of reverse FOMO?
No.
Okay, you know what FOMO is, right?
I know what FOMO is. Yep.
So for those who don't know, it's
fear of missing out, right? So it's FOMO for everybody, just to make sure everybody knows.
So one of the tips here too, if you have a hybrid, is to get a virtual MC. The virtual MC, a specific job is to take care of the virtual audience no matter what's happening on the main stage, right? So sometimes like I would come in and I would talk to the virtual audience only. And then as stuff started happening on the main stage, I would hand it over to them, but I wouldn't stop, right? I would be the virtual advocate for them, right? So like if the camera is not right or the audio is starting to go out, I have a direct line to the tech team to try and fix that before anybody in the virtual audience starts complaining. And they love that. They thank you for that. Now, in reverse FOMO, in one part, I was in a hybrid. I was asked to be the virtual MC, and we were supposed to come on to a next meeting. All the virtual people are on, and we're like, hey, we got to log out. I think we got to go to the next session. And somebody goes, oh, man, this next session is canceled. I'm like, canceled? They didn't even tell me, by the way. I missed it. And so I'm like, the next session was something called 5 minutes, where different people in the live audience were going to present 5 minutes of a tip on PowerPoint, right? So it's kind of like crowdsourcing. And so somebody in the virtual audience goes, hey, wait a minute. I wrote one of those 5 tips and was supposed to present it. Does anybody want to hear it? And the whole audience started going, yeah. Steve, what happened in the next 60 minutes was the best virtual 60 minutes I've had in the last 2 years. Because what happened is one person gave a tip, right? And somebody else goes, hey, I've got one too. The second person had a tip, right? And then somebody goes, I don't have a tip, but I can definitely teach something. So we just went on. There was like 12 or 13 things that happened in that 60 minutes. It was, and it was just like, it was authentic, right? It was spontaneous. It was fun. it was really valuable. I got 12 tips that even though I've been on PowerPoint for 30 years, even I didn't know. So I text the organizer. His name's Rick. I'm like, Rick, dude, you got to log in. So he logs in 30 minutes into this thing and he's blown away. And then he private messaged me and he goes, hey, John, put me on Spotlight. I'm like, okay. So I spotlight him and he goes, I'm so blown away. He goes, as your conference organizer, I've been worried about FOMO, which is the virtual audience having FOMO about something in person. And he goes, but now I think I have to worry about reverse FOMO. Because right now, all the in-person people are all sitting around doing nothing because they're like on break, right? And the best stuff is happening here on virtual. And he goes, now I have to worry about the virtual being so good that the in-person people feel like they're missing out. So that's one of my goals now as a virtual MC is to create reverse FOMO, at least at one time. And Steve, I went to a government social media conference at the same thing because, the in-person audience, if they're not logged in, is missing the chat. And some people said, I learned more from the chat than I did from the speaker. It's not a knock on the speaker. It's just saying you have so many experts who are actually in your same position that it's more valuable to you in your role. Amazing.
Well, it's funny as you're talking and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking, wouldn't it be really cool for me to take some Friday Foresight TV and rather than having a guest, just put the link out there and say, come and teach us something. We did this one time and I was terrified about it. So I was at a conference last year. There's a guy by the name of James Ree, amazing thought leader. He turned around a company that was bankrupt and made it more profits than it ever had in 18 months. He keynoted it. I reached out to him, asked him, and he said, well, why don't we try inviting guests on? It's like, I don't know. Why don't we open it up to the audience? And I was like, I could put this link out. Anybody could come in. Well, this platform here, you actually have, in effect, you have got a green room. And so if it's somebody you don't know, it's actually easy to control. But it was a great, we did an hour and it was a great conversation. I love that.
Yeah, it goes back to crowdsourcing. We were talking about it pre-pandemic, but it's even better now, especially in virtual, because Steve, now too, you can get people from international. I mean, Steve has known that I run a karaoke group every Saturday, 7:00, by the way. And we've had people from Saudi Arabia, regulars from Philippines, right? New Zealand, England, as well as here in the United States. And that is very difficult to do in the real world, but of course is much easier here to do in virtual world.
So, okay, so I got to talk to me a little bit about this. Actually, I want to leave the karaoke for a minute first. Let's talk a little bit about equipment. I would love to hear kind of what your setup is.
Yeah, go ahead and re-spotlight if you don't mind and change the view here for a second.
Yeah, I will do that.
Because let me go back to this view here for a second, right? Number one is I now have 6 screens and I can actually get up to 16. By the way, this right side is actually taken down because I've been running some hybrids. I'm using all the screens for those hybrids, but I didn't really think I could use 6 screens, and now 6 is actually not enough, Steve. And so number one is look for more screens. And by the way, every iPad and every phone can be a screen, and that can be valuable while running a virtual meeting. Because the key here for me too, Steve, is that have you ever gotten lost? Like you did something in Zoom or whatever platform you are, lost the toolbar, lost the control, or something's overlapping it. By having these screens all up, the whole key here is to that you can put things in places where they don't disappear. So I do that all the time. I also use a technique called screen mapping, which is I always put something somewhere. So for instance, when Zoom is running, I always have chat right here, and I have the participants list right here. And I know the way that I run this is that it doesn't disappear. So those are some of the things. One is, try and get as many screens. So number two is in front of me is an iPad. Right. And so now people all the time ask me, how do I put music in? So if you can see now, look, this is a live camera. This is my hand. Right.
Yep.
And I have a mixing board over here. This is a USB mixing board. The original one costs 100. This one costs like 180. So now I can put in royalty free music. So hopefully your stream doesn't get killed. Here we go. Right. So you can do things like this. Let's check this out. Ready? Hey, Steve is amazing, but he's still the worst geocacher. Right?
I love it.
So the other piece of technology I really want to share is this thing over here. So way down over here on my right hand side, if you can see my right hand moving, this is called a Stream Deck. And so a Stream Deck allows you to push button automate lots of different things. So one of them here now is, if you watch here, is, hey, let's go to my office. Now let's go to the ocean. right? How about we go? Oh yeah. By the way, I create a no sorry zone in my virtual meetings, so you never have to say sorry unless you're Canadian. And then here, like, hey, let's go to my backyard. So that's how I'm. One of the things here is speed. So as a producer, I'm probably one of the fastest producers. Is that I start to look for automation and shortcuts so I can do things that are quick like this. You know, my favorite one here is Steve, you probably know this. Steve, do you love video games or not?
Not.
Okay, well, that's good because for those who do, I want to give you a bunch of coins for being a great host. There you go. So you can automate a whole bunch of this stuff to come back here and do that. And so a Stream Deck, again, is a push button piece. You can also buy the software, which is only a couple bucks a month. And a Stream Deck will run on an iPad or an iPhone, basically any Android device. And it will help you automate by putting a lot of these things on push button so that you can do them quickly. Does that help, Steve?
Oh man, that is so cool. I love that. I love that. I love that. So, what was the other question I asked you? Now I forgot. You wrote it down, maybe.
We have equipment, we have photos, we had in person. Oh, well, we can go back to karaoke now if you want to go.
Oh yeah, let's go to karaoke. That's what I want to know is about karaoke.
Let's see if I still have a stage here with me. I need 4 seconds. So let's see. Right, as I go through some of these, how about some cupcakes? How about like a big piece here? Where is my stage?
So what is that behind you? Well, I got to ask you what that is.
Oh, well, this is, our good friend. Like I spent a lot of time with Tony Robbins and talk about people who have transitioned. He built a system like this so he can actually display 20,000 people or more in a virtual meeting. And he's speaking in his own studio, right? He invested a lot. Like you saw at my studio, I can probably see about 400 or 500 people live if I chose to change my setup. Right. He has gone to this level, and it has allowed him to do things like to do programs to that many people. Let's see, where do I have a stage here? So let me come back to here. So as I come back to here, I'm going to find a stage in just a minute. But one of the things that we did in karaoke is that we started running karaoke of March of 2020, Steve, and you can come split us now at this stage. And we learned a lot. Basically every week. Let's see if I. Oh, this is a different screen. Oh, wait, I found it. This is my stage. There we go. Okay, so this is a karaoke stage right here. This actually, if you see it, is rotating if you watch carefully. And I run a karaoke, and one of the things that would happen there is just like I like karaoke, but we want to discover how to do it on virtual. And so there's all sorts of problems. Don't get me wrong, Steve, is that learning how to sing karaoke on any virtual platform is difficult. And we learn them all, over the course. We've actually run over 100 shows where 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. We've run the show every Saturday, and we've discovered things like enable original audio. This is a key that's on Zoom. It's on many other platforms now because of it. What it does is that many of the platforms optimize for you talking, right? But they're also trying to get rid of background noise. So the problem is when you hit a high note, or something like that, Zoom or other platforms think like, hey, he's too loud. Let's shut that down. And this original audio will take that off. And so it allow you to do this. So then I've been able to do all these, so the key to it is if you wanted to do karaoke on virtual is that you enable this original audio, right? You could actually just share the audio or share the screens if you want to share the words. By the way, don't try and have everyone sing at the same time unless you want them off, which we have done, by the way. We break the rules because it's funny, but there's a delay, right? There's a delay. Like if Steve and I try and sing the same song at the same time, he's going to come in like 2 to 4 seconds later. Right. So that's why like I need to run my own video. If Steve's going to sing, he's got to run his own video. But then you learn tricks like share computer sound. Right. And then the last trick is you take the volume and run it to like a half or slightly below half using the YouTube volume. And then we've been able to match person singing with the volume of the music at the same time. And so therefore we've had people sing. And I got to tell you, Steve, many of my friends came back and they said that it's one of the things that helped them get through a pandemic.
That is cool.
I know you're in senior living.
So I know that there are some karaoke singers in our audience. How do they find your karaoke that you do?
I believe it's engagingvirtualkaraoke.eventbrite.com. Again, engagingvirtualkaraoke.eventbrite.com, and it's free. and it's fun and amazing. Again, what you see too is that I learned a lot of the visual tricks that I'm doing here in karaoke. So if Steve picks a song, like Steve, tell me your favorite song. Do you have a song?
Nothing. Drawing a blank here. Not a karaoke singer, so.
Drawing a blank. Okay, well, anyways, let's say he chose "Jump" by Van Halen. If he starts singing "Jump" by Van Halen on my side, I put Steve up in the video. Then I'm looking in one of my other videos so that I'll get Van Halen's "Jump" video and play it like in a window in the corner of him. And then I can find the karaoke version of "Jump" that has the words. I have to actually align it to the words and figure it out. Then I can put that on screen so somebody who's watching this can also sing along with you, even though they're on mute.
Wow. So are there copyright issues with using that music for karaoke?
There is, which is why I don't live stream it. Karaoke, but all the actually karaoke versions for the most part are not copyrighted because it's not the actual song. If you get a correct karaoke song, they have had a band or somebody else recreate the music, right? So then it doesn't get flagged. But I got to tell you, like I can tell you a lot of experiences that don't try and live stream karaoke for the most part. Again, because I don't charge, then I don't have to deal with parts of that. I'm not a lawyer, by the way, too. So if you are going to try it, you should just ask your lawyer. But you know, it's on YouTube. So all people are doing is using their individual ability to play a YouTube video.
Okay, that makes sense. I was actually attending a virtual event, and they were in the break. They were using licensable music, and one of the places they were broadcasting, it was a freebie, and so they were broadcasting onto Facebook. And as soon as they started playing this music, of course, Facebook's got an algorithm, and immediately they killed the feed, and they had to come back and fix it. So you do have to be careful. So, John, we're about out of time. We're a little past time. What I want to do is I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how do people find you? How do they get your book?
Yeah, no problem at all. Easy one here, right? Is this engagingvirtualmeetings.com. I've got a whole website of tips. Actually, one of my videos recently went viral that will show you how to play reverse charades. Steve, you know what charades is, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, reverse charades is easy. Instead of one person acting and everyone guessing, Steve is the guesser. And imagine a screen of 50 people are all the actors. We all do stuff trying to get Steve to say the words. I got to tell you, it's hilarious. It's super fun, super energetic.
Man, that sounds like great fun.
Yeah. So again, go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com. There's lots of things that are there that will help you in your virtual meetings.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is, you know, we as an organization are completely decentralized. We don't have an office. I work out of my home, and I've got an office here, and I've got team members all over the country. And so we love meetings, and we have a very dynamic discussion. But the question is how do you create these great meetings for, you know, and some of you who are watching this are working with organizations where you need to bring together hundreds of people. And as I talk to your people who work in your organizations, they get really bored. And so if you can take the things that John's talking about, take a look at his site, get his book, you'll have better meetings. And you know what? Thank you very much. I love that. And the other thing I would say is that you know, this is with purpose, right? This is not just for fun. This is about people saying, I love being a part of your organization. And so more than anything else, this is about people saying, man, I'm so happy I work here. I'm going to invite my friends to come work here. And with the staffing crisis we face right now, these are the kinds of things that can make all the difference in the world. So, John, thank you very much. Thank you for teaching us how to do this better. Thank you for what you're doing to make the world a better place. And with that,
wait, Steve, I got one last message for you. Good. You ready?
Yep.
Here we go.
Thank you for attending the performance. And a special thanks to all those who helped with the show.
There you go.
It. And with that, we are going to say goodbye with this.